Alright guys, that's Kremp again. I hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far as the countdown to the World Championship continues. Merc continues his rampage against hackers online, but it seems like the hackers might be helping out some of the pro players in terms of finding spots going into the World Championship. Neptune runs into an incredible wallband spot on Hacienda that maybe he will save, or somebody will save, for the World Championship, but it was revealed effectively by playing a hacker in ranked play. Are there other spots that pros have come up with going into the big one? We know that Huke came up with something on dealership a while ago, that then got GA'd by the pros, but if there are new ideas that the pros are preparing for the World Championship, it's not like you can GA them on the weekend itself. Very much interested to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new, as always. I greatly appreciate it. Plenty to get into today. Just starting, I thought it was a pretty good content yesterday. Daltouche goes around, with a round of golf with Scump and Methods. Not gonna lie, given the fact that I don't know if Touche is like a good teacher or something, or if Scump and Zinni are just kind of like pretty natural at it. I mean, Scump is pretty natural at any sport he plays. And look, you look at his swing and it's not like spectacular or anything like he's been playing for years, but it's pretty fundamentally sound. I don't know if we're going to start getting more content like this. BenJ Nassim hitting the course, Nadeshot hitting the course. I mean, Puckett play is nameless plays a bit. I know that Rambo's like pretty good because he's good at everything, right? So I don't know if we're going to be seeing a bit more of this going forwards. But fundamentally, Scump's swing is pretty unplayed, right? So anyway, I'm sure that like the tweets that we're seeing here were just the highlights of the day. I'm sure there were some lowlights as well. But Zinni was kind of cooking too, not gonna lie. So I thought it was pretty cool content. I don't know if we're going to see more of this type of stuff. At the end of the day, in the COD scene, I think, what keeps things turning around is always the personalities, more so than necessarily the gameplay. In the same way that with Crimsix going and racing cars and stuff, it's still interesting to see what he's up to, even though it might not be necessarily Call of Duty. Not to say that, Scump and the boys are going to go pro in golf and try and win the Masters in a couple of years, but you know what I'm saying anyway. So I thought it was pretty nice to see some content at least coming out over the last few days for some of the personalities in the space, because as we know full well, there hasn't been that much content. I love this putt from Scump as well. He just lines it up and like, he just doesn't care. Pace, who cares about pace? You just slam it in the back of the cup and then, it goes in every single time. So, good advice here from Scump. We'll get into some of these interesting clips in a second. This is also pretty interesting. So Drill sat down with Nero the other day and was talking about the season that they had and really the Minnesota Rocker in general. They failed to make it to the World Championship. In the end, it wasn't especially close, but they could have made it, right? It was a possibility. They gave it a bit of a go. And to be fair, I think for Kenny, given where he found that team, even if they'd have won a lot of Game 5s, I think still them making it to champs would have been a really tall order. And as a result, I don't think that Kenny's stock is taking a dip. If anything, it might have gone the other way. I don't know how the pros felt about Kenny after the OpTic stint. Obviously, some of the fans had Kenny basically rock bottom, right? Because the OpTic stint was horrific. He was in the 0.8 in terms of KD. He had that 0.3 against Thieves. Like, it was a bit of a shambles. But as we know, he was then removed off the team, but he got picked up pretty quickly to another roster, went on to Minnesota Rocker. The fans, I think, probably felt like at the time, damn, Kenny's getting slammed. Like, this guy, he's not got it anymore. I think that was a feeling of some of the fans. It wasn't a feeling that I necessarily shared. But what matters really is what the pros think, right? Like, how do they perceive this? And my understanding is, and Don talked about this a lot on the show, even at the major, that as far as he is concerned and aware, it's really made no difference at all, if not even helped Kenny's stock as a player. You've got guys like Nero coming out and saying that this guy's basically the perfect teammate, holds himself accountable, keeps everyone else accountable, and yeah, was Kenny spectacular on Rock and No, but he played pretty solid cards. I don't know if that's where he'll want to stay. I think ideally, of course, for Kenny, he'll probably look to go to another team, but I think he would like to stay in Texas, and there's only so many teams that are based there, right? Like, you look at maybe Kenny to Surge, could be an interesting thing, that he probably doesn't want to go move up there, right? So, there were some other options to consider, and I think he does have the choice as to what team he would potentially go to, because his stock is still in a good position. From the perspective of the fans, I can see why people say, yeah, well, maybe Kenny isn't all that. But, like, trust me, the pro players, the way they think about Kenny, is they still hold him in very, very high regard indeed, even after what happened this season. And, you can't rule out Kenny getting a really solid team offer next year. Like, is it going to be a FaZe? Is it going to be a Thieves? No, very, very unlikely. But is there a possibility maybe of some other organisation coming in and saying, we're going to poach one or two players away, right? Like, let's see one of these Saudi teams comes in, Twisted Minds, Al Qaeda Esports, whatever the case is. they come in, they form a new team. Even maybe the Falcons, they decide to drop the bag and try and build a bit of a roster. Okay, they're probably keeping Pred. Do Kenny and Pred want to team with each other again? I don't know, we'll see. Maybe it's an option, right? But I think my point is that let's say somebody comes in and steals away a Simp and aBeZy, right? Like, they make a big play, they drop a load of money, and they manage to effectively break up one of the super teams in the league. I think Kenny's the type of player that those guys will say, okay, you know, yeah, you got me, I'm the talent, but, you know, in terms of a leader, let's bring in Kenny. So I think that's where his future might lie. I think we'll see, really, what happens over the next few days. But some interesting clips coming out, certainly going into the World Championship. There's, again, Merc cooking as ever against some hackers in ranked play. You know, we've seen this a lot lately. Merc actually grinding a lot of ranked, which is typical, first of all, because most players aren't really playing much of anything. And sure, the game is a little different, but, I mean, in many respects, maybe it could be considered a bit better because he's using the Jackal, which has now been nerfed a little bit. So when he goes back to using the Jackal on the normal patch update, it's like using, like, training bads, whatever you want to say, right? Like ankle weights. You know, he's slowed himself down, and then when he goes onto the real patch the pros are playing on, then all of a sudden the Jackal is better. Now, got to be careful with control, of course, because of the spawns there being slightly different, so you don't throw off the muscle memory. I mean, probably dramatically different, to be honest. But still, Mercury's not missing, continues, you know, he called himself the anti-cheat the other day on that clip on Hacienda. That doesn't necessarily seem to be going away. But there have been some other interesting things happening as well. If you guys remember, a couple of weeks ago now, we saw Huke use that spot on the dealership search and destroy. It was a wallbang from the garage onto the bomb site, and there was a feeling that, wow, this effectively ruins the map. And that's not the only wallbang spot that we've started to see come out. On this particular game, there's all sorts of wallbang spots that are possible. And, well, this apparently is one of them as well. The quality on this isn't great, but you can still see the general idea here. Now, we've seen this last year as well. Modern Warfare 3, it was a big talking point towards the end of the year. Some of the ideas that mainly the New York guys were coming up with. New York last season, okay, they didn't win the World Championship. They gave it a good go. They made it to the finals, but they were probably in some respects, again, the most innovative team last season. You guys might remember some of the nades, like, lineups they came up with, and they would use, like, strong arm or whatever it was to launch the nades across the map, and they had some great ideas with that. They brought out some wallbang spots, you guys probably remember, on maps such as Invasion. They had some interesting ideas, and, you know, there was a wallbang spot towards the B site, which seemed pretty overpowered, and they had all sorts of stuff in the pipeline ready to go. And we've seen this before, whereas at the end of the season, when the World Championship is coming around, teams have saved certain ideas that they will look to bring into play, which is why it was a little bit surprising that it was only a couple of weeks ago where Huke was using that wallbang spot on the dealership that then the pros decided, okay, this kind of ruins the map, let's just agree not to use it between one another. They agreed not to use it, and that's how it is for now. But arguably, if you'd have just saved that for Champs, what are you going to do? It's Champs weekend. Are you going to GA it Thursday, Friday night? Probably not, right? You're just going to say, well, the game's the game, we're going to play it for the rest of the weekend. This is also true in Modern Warfare 19, several years ago now, but if you guys are watching back then, you'll probably remember that Illy came up with this spot, right, and I just downloaded it here to get it in some high quality for you guys to see the wallbang in its pure form and pure action. But Illy came up with an idea back in Modern Warfare 19, it was on Gunrunner Search and Destroy, and he came up with the sniper angle, right? There was an angle where he went to on the back of the map on Gunrunner, the bomb was down over at A, whatever the bomb site was, and he used this spot to great effect to the World Championship that year. Nobody was really ready for that spot, they pulled it out at Champs, and they won some maps as a result of it. So this is the spot in question here on the Hacienda, and we've got Neptune getting wallbanged by the pistol. Now, the game's kind of weird. There are some spots you actually can't wallbang with anything else, but you can wallbang it with the pistol, and yeah, okay, this guy is hacking or whatever, so he kills this guy through the wall. But the point is, the Neptune then does it back the other way, and he does at least get a hit marker. Now, I wouldn't be massively surprised if this hit marker effectively did nigh on full damage. Like, we've seen this before, wallbang spots like this effectively not taking any damage away from your weapon. So, pretty remarkable, because clearly Neptune wasn't aware of this, I wasn't aware of this, but this hacker was aware of this, and as a result, Neptune decides, you know what, yeah, that's pretty interesting. Now look, how relevant is this? It's only really relevant in this particular situation on this particular hill. Maybe there's a world in which you find yourself in a 1v1, your teammate's in a gunfight over towards garage, you're in the middle of the map, and he calls him, he's one shot, he's one shot, he's one shot, and you go for this wall bang and you get the kill. It's maybe, you know, that could happen 1 in 10,000 rounds, maybe. But, you know, is it going to happen in the World Championship? Maybe not. So the only other potential use case would be something like this, when it's over towards this hard point, and, you know, you got to get a trade, or you got to try and get a kill or something. It's obviously the guy has to be weak probably to make it work, but it's still something at least to think about. So pretty remarkable. I just, as I say, I wonder really whether, okay, great, there's a new wallbang spot here on Hassie, and it's probably not going to be massively relevant, but my point is that this is probably not the only wallbang spot which is available in this game that has not yet been discovered. Now, there probably have been things been discovered, but things that have not been used yet by the players. And I wouldn't be surprised if at the World Championship we see some ideas come to light, because the teams that are best prepared tend to be the teams that, you know, will execute well enough. What teams will have come up with these ideas? Could it give some team a surprise chance to make a serious run? Possibly, right? I don't think you can rule anything out as it presently stands. Just before we finish off the video, Vegas Falcons, of course, fare well from the 2025 season. I did want to say that this tournament, the 3 CDL and 13 Challenger teams, so this tournament is happening, I think it's Saturday, Sunday. I know they've said 20th, 21st, but I think it might be Saturday, Sunday, although I might be wrong on that. I'm not exactly sure when the tournament is unfolding, but it is this weekend regardless, the weekend before the World Championship. 10k prize pool, Toronto putting on a tourney, and it's great to see. Now, I kind of theorized that out of the 16 teams, 3 CDL, 13 challengers, that one of them would probably be Toronto, right? They're hosting the tournament, would be an opportunity to get their team ready for the World Championship. But equally, I guess if, you know, you are going to play it, then all the other teams are going to watch you, right? And, you know, maybe you don't think that's a big deal, but it's something at least to think about. So my understanding is that Toronto will not be playing in this tournament, and instead it will be 3 of the 4 teams that did not make it to the World Championship, right? So the teams that are just preparing for the World Cup. So which 3 teams those are, don't know, but we'll see, right? So I don't think Toronto are going to play in this, and it also makes it interesting why one of those, like if it is going to be just the teams that didn't make it to champs, then why would you not maybe have all 4 of them and then 12 challenger teams rather than 3 of them and 13? There's probably a reason for that. It may be that one of those teams has already imploded, but you know, we'll see. I think that's what I understand anyway, is that those are the CDL teams that will play are actually not the ones for champs. It's still obviously a talking point, because those teams that are going to play in this tournament, if they didn't make it to the World Championship, are likely looking to blow up their roster shortly after the World Championship and sign some of the players that just played in it. That is probably true for the Falcons, let's be honest. Shotzzy certainly hinted at it a while ago that he's expecting some changes to happen after champs based on the results that we see. We'll see if that comes true in due course. But intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. One of the first matchups of the World Championship is Thieves versus Boston. This, of course, famously was a matchup at the World Championship in the first round 3 years ago, when LA Thieves took down at the time Methods Boston in the Game 5 Round 11 Tuscan Search and Destroy. We talked about that clip that Methods gave some context on just the other day. 3 years later, back at it again, the same first round game. Are Boston going to be able to put up a fight as they did a couple of majors ago when they beat Thieves in the first rounds? You know, who knows? Obviously, Thieves will be considered heavy favourites, but I think if there's any time you've got a decent chance of beating them, it's probably in the first round, where they're not yet warmed up, they've not yet caught momentum in the tournament, and frankly, Boston have now had a good weeks to prepare for this matchup, right? As have Thieves, to be fair, but, you know, Thieves will be looking further forward, they'll be looking at FaZe, they'll be looking at somebody else. Boston will be putting all of their attention into beating Thieves in the first round, and if they do it, then, well, it sets up a rather exciting tournament. So, very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.
So full of shit. He's unkillable.
Love it, girl.